Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Nichole.
And this is Jillian.
And today we got to sit down and talk to Elaine Bogan, who is a director over at DreamWorks, and she is coming out with her first feature film called Spirit Untamed, which, if you grew up in the early 2000s or you were raising kids then, you've probably seen the original Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron. I know that it was a fan favorite of mine when I was a kid. I remember going to the movie theaters and seeing it, and but now they're coming out with a new movie and it is headed to theaters this week. So by the time this podcast comes out, it'll actually have been in theaters over the weekend. It came out June 4th. But I was so excited that they came out with a new film, and now my friends' kids who they're raising are getting to, experience the same thing that I kind of did when I was a kid, and I got to go to the theater and see Spirit in the big screen. And so Jillian and I actually got to watch the film a little earlier. And so Jillian, what did you think of the film?
I loved it. I thought that the overall storyline of showing a girl and the bond with her horse and how impactful that can be was very well done. And then I also thought that the underlying themes and messages that were kind of thrown in there were just so powerful and so great for kids that are going to be growing up watching this movie, because I think it's so important for them to have role models like that up on the big screen. Each girl had their own battle that they overcame, and it showed how they worked together and how they, had to work independently. And I just think that it's really going to be a very impactful movie for kids these days, just how the original was for us growing up.
Yeah, and the cast is insane. I mean, talk about a high profile cast. You have Jake Gyllenhaal, Julianne Moore. Those are just a couple off the top of my head. Walton Goggins, which is I love him. I think he is hilarious. But they just have, an insane cast. And Elaine, who's the director who we got to speak with, is a horsewoman herself, and she grew up riding. And I think that is so important when you are creating a film around horses. And when we get into the podcast a little bit, Elaine talks about how difficult it is actually to animate equine characters, which I had no idea. I don't know about you.
I never even thought about that, really. Just I have no idea what goes into all of that, but I'm really glad that they paid so much attention to it, because I definitely would have noticed it if it were wrong. But it was so well done.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part about being a horse person, and maybe seeing things in film or on TV or whatever. If you don't have a horse person on set, sometimes it is hard to kind of resonate with a true horse audience. So I think they did such a great job, reaching out to that equine familiar audience, but also reaching out to the general public so that they're not getting confused with terms that we might use, or, they kind of do a really great job of explaining things so that the general audience isn't getting lost with the terminology. So I so appreciate it. I loved speaking with Elaine. She was so sweet. And, I was so excited for her to have this film, and, they had to overcome quite a few obstacles with the pandemic. That was a whole new territory for a lot of people in that industry, working from home. The voice acting, or the voiceover work was done from home, which is very unfamiliar for a lot of those guys. And having to work on a large movie set, but all remotely, I couldn't imagine the complications that come with something like that.
I know. The whole time that we were talking about that with her, I was just picturing Jake Gyllenhaal sitting in his closet recording this. And that must have been so weird for all of them, and having to like build their own sound studios at home. And that was definitely a new experience for all of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, in our career, I feel like it was a very easy transition. Obviously, Jillian came in a little later in the pandemic, so she didn't really go through what most of us that were based in the Boulder office went through. But I felt like it was a fairly easy transition. But I think that a lot of the stuff that we do is very easy to do from, a remote location. It was just different not being around all of the, office employees, our team members, being able to collaborate in an office. But yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to create a movie for like, the big screen from your home. But yeah, like I said earlier, this came out June 4th. So by the time this comes out, it's already out. Highly, highly recommend going to see it in theaters. Movie theaters are starting to open up again. I know I'm really excited to get back to the theaters. I love seeing movies in the movie theater. I love eating the popcorn. I love the whole experience. So if
I'm
that's your
so
kind of
excited.
thing, go see it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get back into the movie theater. So before we jump into that interview with Elaine, did you see that IEA is adding the ranch riding to their class lineup? I think that that's really exciting for them.
Yeah, I'm not totally surprised that we're seeing this happen more and more. I think ranch riding has become such a huge event, in Horse and Rider On Demand. That's continuously some of our top played videos. AQHA just announced the Ranch Trail coming and being an approved class for these horse shows, and the ranch riding has continuously been the largest event at the AQHA World shows for the last couple years. And Jillian, you're in the paint horse industry, and they actually have a couple more classes than the AQHA stuff does. You guys have the Ranch Rail. I think you've already had Ranch Trail for a couple of years now, but I mean, you guys are seeing a huge push for the ranch events in the APHA stuff as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. We have been adding, like you said, slowly adding different ranch classes, and now they some of the numbers are bigger and then the other all around classes at the shows. So, and at the APHA World Show this year, they're having just so many ranch classes with, incentives and money and things like that. So it's growing so fast, but I love it.
So you're a little more familiar with the IEA than I am. Can you talk a little bit, obviously you didn't do the high school level, but you did the collegiate level of this kind of organization. Can you talk a little bit about what someone can expect if they're going to compete in something like that? Obviously the ranch riding is something that you didn't do while you were there, but I would imagine that it kind of transfers over the same way as the other classes.
Yeah, so IHSA added the ranch riding a couple of years ago, like right after I left, and I was really bummed because I would have loved to have done that. But so I did the reining and the horsemanship with IHSA, and it's such a different way to horse show than what I think most people think of when you think of horse showing. But basically, you show up with your team and are it's a random draw for what horse you get, and then you don't have any warm-up time or anything. You just go in the ring and show, and it's a huge confidence builder, but just it really shows the talent of the rider. And because it's not based on the horse at all, the judges aren't supposed to look at the horse's movement. They're supposed to be able to judge through if the horse is acting out or not, and they have a list of, the horse is spur trained, the horse is not spur trained, and all of that, which the riders get as well. So a lot of it is luck of the draw, but a lot of it is also just pure, riding ability.
Yeah, I did the NCAA, now NCEA stuff. So I totally relate to the showing of different horses and it being based on how you ride and not so much the horse. And it's a little different where, each team member from opposing teams has to ride the same horse and they don't have as many different classes. They just had the open event. But if anybody is interested in learning more about the IEA and the new ranch riding classes that are going to be available, you can visit www.rideiea.org. And if you're wanting to get involved in the ranch riding and you don't know where to start, visit Horse and Rider On Demand. That's ondemand.horseandrider.com. And you can get a free 7-day per trial. And we have tons and tons of ranch riding content. We're constantly coming out with more. And we're actually getting ready to release a ranch versatility series with Cody Crow. And I just think that, if you want to get involved with the ranch classes and you've never done it before, that's a really great outlet and a great resource. So be sure to check it out. Kind of going off of Horse and Rider On Demand, I just got back from an extensive video shoot, which is why Jillian and Michaela, our previous co-host, I'm sure you guys have noticed that Michaela is not on this, interview right now. Michaela has transitioned to a different part of the company, and Jillian just joined us. And while I was gone on this video shoot, Jillian and Michaela got to sit down and talk. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, please go check it out, because you'll get to learn more about Jillian and and Michaela's transition. But while I was there, I did a 5-day video shoot, and oh my god, I was drained by the time I got home.
I can't even imagine. And plus, the weather was kind of all over the place and it was hot, and I'm sure you were so tired.
Yeah, it's North Texas in May, so it was wet and humid, and you didn't really know what was going to happen. But while I was there, we had a couple curveballs thrown at us. Poor Bud, who is our reining and ranch riding expert and has been with us since the start, got super sick. It wasn't COVID related, it was just a stomach bug, but he was out. So I had to find, and thankfully Bud helped me, even though he was in bed trying to feel better. Found a replacement to do a video shoot on that next day, so that I wasn't sitting around in Texas for a whole day not doing anything. So thankfully, Peter DeFreitas stepped in and was so kind to accept a phone call from me at 8 o'clock at night the night before, asking if he wanted to do a video shoot in the morning.
I didn't realize that it was that short notice. That's awesome, though.
Oh,
that
yes.
It worked out.
While I was on the airplane, I was getting text messages telling me that, tomorrow's not going to work.
No.
So my shoot actually ended up getting extended so that Bud and I could film at the end of that week, because he was thankfully feeling better by then. But we did lots of good content with Bud, as we always do. Peter's video series is really focused on young horses. He has lots of 2, 3, and 4-year-old reining horses for open and non-pro competition. So you'll learn a lot about the younger horses and getting one prepped for the show season. And then we're also introducing the all-around stuff to Horse and Rider On Demand finally. And we got to work with Robin Frid, who is somebody that I've looked up to for a very long time and is a good friend of mine. He has trained, I don't know, probably like 60 world championship riders in AQHA competition. On top of being a world champion trainer himself. His wife is just as amazing, but unfortunately she could not be part of the shoot. She was busy that day, but so we're super excited to bring the all around to Horse and Rider On Demand, especially with Robin. And then also on top of Robin's video shoot was Will and Elizabeth Nabenshoot, who I also adore. They're such great people. They're great friends with Robin, so I think their training styles really complement each other. So you'll be able to take away a little bit of everything from both of them, but they are also our other on-demand all-around experts. And Will and Elizabeth have lots of non-pro riders, which I think is so important when we're working with on-demand experts, because I think that being able to talk to a non-pro is huge, because there's so many people and so many trainers that only work with horses, open level horses. They don't have to work with the non-pro clientele as much. And I think the best way to do, this online video stuff and to be able to explain what you're doing, you really have to think in the ways that you would if you were talking to a non-pro. So I think that Will and Liz's background is so important, and they go over some of the trail basics that you're going to need if you ever want to get involved in showing in the trail class. They cover a few other horsemanship and Western riding basics, and just general horsemanship basics you need if you're going to compete, or just riding. I mean, you need those general basic skills if you're going to ride.
Yeah, definitely. That's such an important foundation to have. So I think that's great that we're going to have that on the on-demand now.
Hopefully we will have those coming out very, very soon. I know that we're trying to plan as soon as possible because we don't have any all-around content. So be on the lookout. And let's jump into this interview. Today we have the rare opportunity to sit down with director Elaine Bogan to talk about her latest film, Spirit Untamed, which is coming out June 4th. So by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be out for a couple days now. So hopefully you've already seen it. But if not, be sure to head to your local theater and check it out. But before we start talking about the film, I really want to dive into Elaine's personal horse life because Elaine, you are a fellow horsewoman and you also got to produce excuse me, you got to direct this amazing film about horses and the love of a horse, actually between a girl and the love of, a wild horse. So can you talk a little bit about your personal horse life and how you even got involved in horses to begin with?
Sure. Yeah. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for having me on the show. Uh, my horse life started way back, I guess, when I was a little 8 or 9 year old kid. And I was somehow the only one in my family who ended up with a horse obsession and begged for riding lessons. And I had two very wonderful, kind, and patient parents who would drive me out to the barn every week just so I could see and hang around and ride the horses. So it started back then, and I've always just been fascinated by them and been really grateful for all of the things that I feel like I learned, and like every kid learns from a horse that doesn't necessarily get you don't get that anywhere else. It's a very particular type of confidence and trust and communication that you learn with these guys, and I feel like all of that stuff has had such an influence on every part of my life, including being where I am today, like sitting in a director's chair, being able to wrangle a 300 person team and just drive that ship towards getting a film done. It takes a lot of confidence and a lot of trust in your team, and there's so many things that sort of translate from horse life into movie life for me. It's been a really cool ride.
I have to say, I totally agree when it comes to horses preparing you for, a career and being able to manage not that kind of team. I've never managed 300 people on a movie set, but it does. It gives you the confidence and horses are a responsibility. At a young age, you have to learn to be responsible and you have to know that that horse relies on you for basic needs and behavior and so you have to be reliable. And I truly believe, that people who grew up with the horses have just a different kind of work ethic.
Absolutely, for sure. And there's a whole other side of things too. Like I was thinking about this the other day because I've been through multiple conversations lately about how have horses helped you get where you are today. And there's not only the work ethic and the respect and the trust and the stepping into really uneasy situations with confidence. There's that whole side of things, but there's also the side of things like growing up as a young woman and then entering into a field, the animation field, which at the time I came in was very male dominated. And I started thinking about how when I was a kid, probably the only time in my childhood that I was looked at by another being without filters, without bias, without another being looking at me with expectations. Oh, she's a young girl, she should be doing this, she shouldn't be doing this. Horses don't look at you that way. So I was at a very young age given an opportunity to be in an environment without expectations because of my gender or my age or this or that. It's I don't think we're lucky to have that at such a young age because it sets us out on a very different perspective in life, I think.
I love the way that you put that, and it's a really interesting way to look at it because when you're growing up and learning to ride and all of that, you're really discovering who you are as a person also. And I never really thought about how that is probably because you're learning and developing with another, animal, but they're not judging you and they're not, putting any expectations towards you. So it really can help you figure out who you are. And that was a great way to phrase that.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I love that too. The idea that you're in an environment with, if you're surrounded by five horses, you're surrounded by five brains trying to communicate with you, but they're not judging you. And that it's not often, particularly young girls can walk through life with that experience. And I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I don't know. It's a very relevant feeling right now.
Well, and I think it's also relevant because that is a really important storyline, I think, in the movie that you did. Like, you have this young girl who was, the expectations were there and they were trying to put her into this box, and she wanted to go out and, be adventurous and do these things. And so really it is, a wonderful story about a young girl who gets to go out and do those things and not be stuck in that, you're a girl, you should be doing this, you're not, being put up against a male in, your work field or whatever. Like, I just love that. It's a story about a young girl who wants to be adventurous and be herself.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm so happy that that's kind of resonating from a first look of the story. And that it was a big part of our experience in making the story and the movie, was going through this process of getting feedback and getting notes. And we would get to certain notes and ask ourselves, well, would we be getting this same note and this same feedback if the characters in our film were young boys? And if the answer was no, then we scrapped it and we kept going and we let our characters develop the way, just naturally, by way of who those characters were, not because of them being male or female.
Absolutely. So kind of going back to your personal life, how was this your first time kind of bringing in your horse life into a career setting? Like, what was that like? I know my whole life is basically horses now that my job is based with horses, and then in my free time I'm riding horses. So it can get a little hard and difficult when, things are busy and rough and I'm spending more time at my computer looking at horses than I am riding my horse. But what was that like, kind of bringing your two loves together?
Yeah, I know. I think you nailed it. The timing of this project coming around and me coming back into feature films and me just having bought a new 4-year-old horse that I was like demanded so much time and care. And I mean, you guys know what that's like. But I got the very first phone call to invite me into this project when I was sitting in my car at the LA Equestrian Center, just heading home for the night. And I was like, okay, so the timing of that is kind of weird. It's pretty perfect. But the one thing, it's like you said, the one thing that I did have trepidation about was, for my entire time in this industry, in the animation industry, I've used my horse section of life as a time to escape and to meditate and just go out into the hills on a trail ride and not think about anything but being in that exact moment, because the industry can be so chaotic and so demanding. And so I've always had that part of my life to rest and recharge. And one of the first things that went through my mind coming into a project about horses that was going to be so deeply involved in research and getting in there, bringing the teams and letting them experience the horse world, I was worried about losing that escape and that recharge, because making a film is like a marathon. This one was short. It was only 2 years long. But when you think about that, it's like 2 years. The worlds were colliding. Animation and horse world were colliding, and I was a little worried about that. But I think, the more I dug in, the more excitement I saw coming out of the team at getting a chance to learn about these animals and interact with them, and it became more exciting. And I think also by way of trying to craft a story about a young girl and a horse who couldn't speak, um, it became a really fascinating study and a learning experience for me as well. I learned a lot during this movie, and it just made me oftentimes go very inward and think about, okay, how exactly does that communication between horses and humans happen, and how can we represent that on screen so that other people who have never interacted with a horse would understand. So it just was a very thoughtful inward process. And hopefully the stuff that we're showing up there on screen is not too inside baseball. It's stuff that's visual enough that anyone can come in and get the emotion of Spirit's story.
Yeah, that was one thing that I did notice while watching, is just that it has such a great, kind of like an outside perspective for people that don't really have any horse experience or knowledge, but it's still letting them see how that, the bond between a kid and a horse works and things like that. So I think you did a great job portraying that in the
Oh,
movie,
thank you.
definitely.
Thanks so much. I mean, we do use some cheats in animation. Like we gave Spirit some pretty human looking eyebrows, and he's got some facial expressions you won't ever see on a horse. But it was always that fine line of walking a tightrope of what's too little, what's too much, and that was a really cool experiment to go through.
I do appreciate the thought that came into the actual understanding of the horse anatomy and their behavior and how they were, move and all that stuff, that you can tell there was a lot of love that was put into that. And I know I was doing a little reading, and I think you mentioned earlier, you brought your crew to the Los Angeles Equestrian Center so they could physically be around the horses, because I imagine you probably had a crew that not many had been around as frequently as somebody like you have. And so, what was that experience like? Did you find that it really did help kind of create the characters the way that you wanted to by having your crew go see these horses in person? And I know that I saw that you worked with a vet to learn the anatomy and just like really go into the details. And as a horse person, I truly appreciate when somebody goes into the fine details, because it sometimes does get left out when you have a non-horse person, creating something.
Yeah. I mean, it might sound funny, but horses are renowned in the animation industry for being one of the hardest animals to recreate on screen in a believable way. So it did take a lot of bringing the team in, and we had Dr. Stuart Samita come and do some anatomy lectures and classes and lectures on the mechanics and the body movements and facial body language, all of that stuff. We had some pretty intense seminars, and it's for me, I as a horse person myself, I couldn't create a movie that I couldn't believe in. If I saw those horses up there and kept getting distracted by a leg moving the wrong way, or um, for me it was important to service both the believability and the authenticity of how horses move and communicate with horses and with humans. Um, so it was a big goal for us to just be as authentic as we could, because then people would spend less time watching and thinking about all that stuff that looked kind of weird and spend more time on the emotional story that was going on behind.
Amen to that. So Ziggy, I believe I read somewhere that you actually created one of the characters in Spirit around Ziggy, right?
Yes, you will probably have caught a glimpse of Ziggy in Spirit's Herd. He's a he's a big dark bay with a white stripe down his face, and in the movie, he sort of took on the role of Ziggy's right hand. He's the lieutenant, and as opposite to Spirit, who grew very comfortable with Lucky because of her kindness, Ziggy stays pretty skeptical of humans all throughout up until the end when he realizes, Lucky's helped them get back home. And it takes him a little longer than Spirit does, but he's it a little bit reflected some of what I go through with Ziggy all the time.
So, going back to Spirit, he's such a iconic character. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and Spirit, the first Spirit movie came out, Stallion of the Cimarron. I was little, and it was just, it's always come like stayed with me. And so it was really exciting to see, the journey continue in another movie. And my friends' kids are now getting to see Spirit in the big theater, which is, cool to kind of know what that feeling is like to see this iconic horse, on the big screen. Do you have a horse, that has that love in your heart, kind of like Lucky has with Spirit in the film? Is there a special horse that you kind of go back to every time you talk about your horse life?
I mean, my horse Ziggy Stardust that I ride right now he's my heart. I spend a lot of time. I wake up every morning at 6 and I get out there and we hang around, go on rides, and it is something unique. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, I saw the first movie when I was young too, and I remember being so drawn in. And it was probably before I started riding, I imagine, maybe. Or no, it was much after, way later. I guess I was in my teens when I saw that movie. But there's something just universally, um, what's the word? Something draws people into stories that have horses in them, and I think it's because of that. I've never been able to quite verbalize or explain to someone how it feels to form a bond with a horse because it's something so unique. So, I mean, there was no better way to do that than to bring my whole crew and just have that experience themselves. And, how intimidating or how emotional or how exciting it can be. Um, and I feel like that's kind of why these stories about horses end up being so timeless, and they stay with us because I remember seeing that first Spirit movie and just I never forgot it, and it actually was one of the movies that inspired me to get into animation school and go down that path because it was something that so deeply resonated. And being part of this Spirit world now, like having come into this franchise, has been so exciting because it's become a franchise that evolves with the generation. It hasn't, it's obviously a quite different story and a set of characters than the ones that were in the first film. But I think that's something really special and unique about it because now it's become Spirit for the new generation. Like even the horse in our movie is said to be the son or grandson of the original Spirit. So he's kind of the new Spirit speaking to the new generation, which I think is kind of nice.
I didn't think of it that way where you're bringing, you're talking to a new generation, but I love it because I can feel that when I watch the film is that it really did speak to the new generation and hopefully inspire some little kids to maybe get involved with horses or connect with an animal in a way if they have the opportunity to.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Ziggy Stardust a little bit. First of all, that might be the best name for a horse I've ever heard.
I'm a big David Bowie fan, so that was Ziggy's fate.
I love it. I am also a David Bowie fan. So, can you tell us a little bit about Ziggy? What do you do with him? What kind of horse is he?
Sure. Ziggy's a 16-2 Dutch warmblood, and he came over from Holland when he was about 3. I found him when he was 4. So we mainly, we do some really amateur low-level dressage. I spend a lot of time in the jump ring where he's very green, but he really loves it. But because I've been raising him with the goal that I don't want him to get bored with anything. So I try and do a lot of different things. We do 1 or 2 trail rides up into the Griffith Park Hills outside the equestrian center every week. I was just out there this morning and it's funny. I was thinking about it on my way home. I'm always the only one in the group out there in a jump saddle and and my tall boots. Everybody else has Western saddles. But Ziggy doesn't do too badly keeping up with those wily quarter horses. He's a big lanky guy, but he does okay.
I love it. I also think it is super important for a show horse to have those outside experiences. I come from the cow horse industry, and my horse, he's won a ton of stuff in the cow horse arena, but I also take him swimming in the reservoir, going, I live in Colorado, so we go trail riding in the mountains, so he is a performance horse, but definitely spends a lot of his time out doing fun stuff because I think it is. You don't want them to get bored, and it's so good for them mentally, just like us. I mean, we have to
Absolutely.
get out of our box and go do something fun and get our mind off of things.
I know. I'm over here talking about I needed my horse life for escaping the animation life, and I mean, like, what kind of person would I be if I didn't let Ziggy have a little fun too? I mean, we haven't. We're working up to our first show season, maybe next summer, and it's a long road getting these guys ready and prepared, and being able, even the idea of him being able to walk into a big indoor arena for the first time with a bunch of weird looking jumps, it's been so beneficial for him just being put into different environments and up in the trail, a different trail every week, and just getting him ready mentally as far as physically is so important.
I think that people often forget that, especially with show horses, it's not a machine. It really is an animal. And so giving them the opportunity to be an animal and be happy, like you said, that's something that in a lot of the great show horses I've noticed that's something that is what a lot of the owners will do. And it really shows how important that is.
Yeah, I was it's funny, but one of my biggest sort of things that I think about most is when it stops being fun or when it starts getting stressful for me or Ziggy. It's time to shut it down and go try something new, it's especially because I have Ziggy around because of, that's my meditation time. And if it's not meditative or relaxing anymore, probably not doing it right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the film. You said that it's been a 2-year project, so I assume that you probably had to make this work during the pandemic. Was that, did you guys do a lot of the work from home? Did you guys have your actors doing voiceover work from home? What was that experience like? Because I'm sure it's nothing like you've probably ever had before.
I mean, for me, I'm a first-time director. I've never directed a feature film before, so I don't really know what normal is yet, I guess. So for me, it was just the first time through the feature pipeline. But, I think the timing of the pandemic hitting was more more easy for us to have taken in than many other projects. And I say that because when the quarantine hit, we were already halfway through our schedule, so we all had already figured out what the story is, what the blueprints are. We already had an actual plan, and then the quarantine hit. But now we have to actually make it happen. So we were fortunate in the way that we had already done a lot of the groundwork. Um, so the challenge became trying to complete a very collaborative, teamwork driven project all separately from our homes. And so that became the challenge. And I think someone had mentioned the other day that we when the quarantine hit, we had only completed 4 of our 55 voice records with our actors. So what that meant was we had to figure out a way to record the actors from home, and it ended up being a system where we would mail all of these microphones and recording equipment to the actors' homes, and then we would kind of get on a video call and help walk them through the setup process and watch them building all these little soundproof bunkers in their kitchens or in their closets and sitting there trying to get as good audio quality as they could. And people's Wi-Fi was going out. I remember Walton Goggins running out of the room to his workshop and coming back with a roll of duct tape because the microphone kept falling over. And it was it was kind of off-roading as far as filmmaking went. But I think because everybody was just so happy to have had something to work on, so dedicated during quarantine when not a lot else was going on. We were all it was a very fortunate industry that in the way that we were able to keep going. And it was definitely a challenge. And I'm looking forward to finding out what making a movie not in quarantine feels like.
Off-roading is such a great way of describing it. I would have never thought to describe it like that, but that's the perfect way to describe it.
It felt that way for sure.
Oh man, I didn't realize this was your first film that you have done. So, I mean, what was it like to be able to do a horse-related film as your first feature film?
Oh my gosh, it was everything. I mean, I remember getting that call. I had come back to DreamWorks Feature from directing in TV with the idea that I wanted to try it out. And for me, whenever I'm taking on any project, no, if it's TV, if it's holiday special, if it's a movie, the only thing is, can I deeply and personally connect to the story we're telling? Otherwise, it's not an authentic story. And the idea that this was not only about horses, it was about this young woman growing up and going through some crazy stuff and trying to realize herself and figure out everything she's capable of in life. And just by way of having supportive friends and family around her, she accomplished it. And it's all of these elements of the story felt so personal already. And so it had that. And I couldn't say no.
Well, and it was Spirit. I mean, like the
And it
most
was Spirit.
iconic horse in history. If you're gonna do a horse movie, it might as well be Spirit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what a great place to start. It's
Mhm.
hard to go on from there, I guess.
I know. I'm dying to find out what's next.
So you mentioned a little bit about some of the cast that worked on this film with you. I mean, off the top of my head, you've mentioned Walton Goggins, but you had Jake Gyllenhaal, Jillian Moore. I mean, those are some iconic names in Hollywood, among others that were in this film as well. did you guys did you create the characters around these actors? Like, was there a plan to have certain actors play certain roles before you had even developed the character?
Yeah, it's funny, my co-director, Ennio Torreson, and I had, as soon as we had the characters fleshed out on the script pages, we immediately had like wish list actors because we were looking to bring in actors and talent that very much already embodied a lot of the qualities and the personality that we wanted the characters to have on screen. So we kind of just we did it that way. And the characters were already kind of developed for us in a way because our characters in our world is heavily based on and inspired by the characters in the Spirit Riding Free TV series. So we had a lot of that groundwork, and we had a really great idea of who we wanted these characters to be. So we kind of tried to translate that. Okay, if this character was a human in real life, what actor would it be? And we kind of just went that way, and it worked out to be an amazing experience because of that. Whenever we would bring an actor in and pitch them the role and talk to them about who the character was, they would multiple actors were asking us, did you write this after having read about me? Like, is this character me? And I'm just and I think because of that, the actors, most of them immediately connected to the story and understood who their characters were. And I think it helped us bring all of this amazing talent in. I think, as an example, our star, Isabella Merced, who plays Lucky, um, in real life, and Marseille Martin and McKenna Grace in real life, they're already these very passionate, artistic, creative, and driven individuals, and they're strong. They're already very strong. And for Isabella in particular, she's also a person in real life who's very connected to her family and her mom and to her culture. And these are all the things that we wanted Lucky to embody on screen. So, why not try and bring her in and play the role? And, hopefully that idea has created characters up on screen that feel authentic and believable. Because, the emotion will carry and resonate to the audience much easier if the actor believes that character that they're playing.
So, kind of like we said earlier, a lot of your crew didn't have the horse experience, and so you brought them out to kind of interact with the horses. But did you have a hard time with with the cast, getting the right emotion when they were speaking and things like that with the horses, or did that just kind of come naturally based off of who you picked?
Yeah, I think it all kind of came naturally, but I would say the one hiccup in it all was the change of environment in which they were all working. A lot of these actors aren't used to recording their voices from home, sitting in a closet, trying to get really deep and emotional, and the air conditioners going off and interrupting the take or whatever else is happening at home. It was just, I think, and that translates to everybody on the crew. None of us were used to working with, pets that would jump up on your keyboard and end the call, or, a lot of our cast and crew have kids that they were taking care of. It just, I think we were all going through something very unique, and uh it was the timing. I don't know, just sitting at home in quarantine making an adventure movie of these kids going out into the wild and having epic adventures. It was the contrast of that was an interesting situation. And now the timing of this adventure movie coming out when the pandemic, fingers crossed, is rolling to an end. It feels it for me, it's exciting because hopefully, even the idea of a family going out to the movie theater is like going on an adventure right now. And hopefully this movie opens up like a big exciting adventure for a lot of people. It was the timing and the correlation of what was happening to us all on the crew in real life versus what was happening with the story was kind of interesting.
I would imagine that it is hard to stay inspired when you're stuck in your house all the time. And especially, I'm assuming most of these actors live in the LA area where there was a strict
Hmm.
shutdown. So I would imagine that it's hard to be inspired or feel that same feeling of these girls going on this insane adventure and you're here stuck in your closet for
I
3 months.
know. I
So
know.
props to them.
I never one day took it for granted that I was very fortunate because I have a horse and he needs care every single day. He has to get out. We have to go on rides into the hills, but not everybody has that. And I think, it's another reason we're all so, so lucky to have these guys in our life.
Yeah, I remember going at the first part of quarantine, and I have friends in New York and LA and everywhere in between. I'm from Chicago originally. And yeah, their experience was like this was one of the hardest things they've ever gone through, and
Mhm.
it was like their whole life changed. And I'm over here like, well, I still go and ride 3 horses every day. Like my life's
Yeah.
pretty normal. I'm still outside. I'm in the sunshine. I'm riding. Like I'm around these animals. I'm able to have a physical outdoor outlet. But yeah, I
Mhm.
forgot that a lot of these people did not get to have that same outlet when they were stuck in quarantine, especially the people that were living in condos or apartments in cities. Like
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine.
absolutely. It it
It
it was.
definitely,
Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it definitely gave me a whole new appreciation for that outlet. It's just kind of always been the normal, but then when I realized I was the only one doing it, and none of my friends had anywhere to go, I was like, oh, I'm pretty lucky that I have a horse that I can go ride.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the lead character in this role, Lucky, who I absolutely adore because I was that headstrong girl when I was a kid that was stubborn and would maybe get on my horse bareback and go running through a field and break my arm.
Mm.
It happens.
Hey, that happened to me when I was 30, so it's not just a kid thing.
I love it. I love that so much.
that has also happened to me, but I was a kid, but I think it's happened to everyone that rides at some point.
It should. I mean, my trainers always used to tell me, "You're not a real rider until you've fallen off 10 times or broken at least 2 bones." So, and I'm well there now.
I love that. When I got into the cow horse, which is quite recently, I don't know how familiar you are with the event, but you're chasing a cow around and you're going pretty fast and things happen and my horse tripped and fell on me and that's a very normal thing to happen and they were like, "You're not a real cow horse rider until you have one fall on you." And I was like, "Perfect. I'm part of the club."
There you go. You've been welcomed into the club.
But no, I loved Lucky. I was that stubborn kid when I was her age and doing things against my parents' wishes, of course. But can was there any inspiration behind the character? Were you coming from maybe your own personal past when you were creating this, developing her personality and what she was like?
Yeah, I mean, again, we were really leaning on a lot of the characters and the themes and the storytelling that the TV series had set up already. And what we all really loved about Lucky was her drive and her independence and her passion and just everything comes from Lucky's heart. Um, I remember when we were first sort of going in to see how we were going to sort of reimagine and dive into a more cinematic, deeper emotional storyline for all the characters. We always thought of Lucky if we looked at the three girls, um, Abigail was the present, Prue represented the past because she was using a lot of the knowledge and the intelligence that her dad passed on to her. Uh, Abigail is very in the moment. She'll sing a song, doesn't care who's listening. She's there. She doesn't necessarily think about the consequences or the reactions or whatever might happen. And Lucky's the future. She's always goal driven and looking straight ahead. So this was kind of how we approached everything. And that, I think all of us have at least some of all of that in us. But what is exciting to me is that these three girls, not just because of their different personalities and their different approaches and point of views, but they all come from very different cultural backgrounds and ways to approach a problem. And what I thought was really exciting about that is that we have these three young female hero characters up there on screen. So that it's tripling our chances of every single person in the audience, particularly a young female audience, looking up on that screen and seeing themselves. And what I love about that idea is that I keep hearing the saying, if you see it, you believe it, and you believe you might be able to achieve that as well. And hopefully, we reach a big audience and just help people get inspired to, understand who they are. And just the coolest part for me about Lucky's story is that she's a character that no matter who's telling her no, or no matter how hard her goal might seem, she stands up and she fights for what she believes in because she knows it's right. And she climbs over the craziest obstacles to get there. Probably stuff no rational human being would ever try in real life. But I think that's a big message for her, and I hope it speaks to a lot of people.
Well, and the three girl characters, they have different personalities, but they're all really strong in their own way. And I love a strong female. I love having that representation on the big screen because I think it's something that we haven't had for a long time. So it makes me really excited to see young girls having these iconic, people to look up to. And not even just in this film, but just in general, we're seeing more female, superheroes and leads, and so it's really exciting. I love that there's this representation of strong women going out
Awesome.
and doing the things they want to do.
I love that. Like at the beginning of when we were first developing the story to figure out, what story are we telling? In some of the original concepts, we had another female character in there who was going to be sort of an adversary to the three girls. And at the end of the day, it didn't take us long to figure out, no, that it's not the story we want to tell. This isn't the platform for perpetuating the idea that young girls need to compete and get there first. What we wanted to do was tell a story about three women working together and also all lifting each other up in order to get to where they needed to go. And it was because of that teamwork and their three very unique personalities and perspectives coming together. They were sort of celebrating each other's differences in order to achieve insane things. And it's not I don't think that's something that's reflected in a lot of stories that we see today. And it was really, really exciting to have been a part of something like that.
The uplifting part is huge. Go ahead, Jillian. Sorry, I unmuted quick.
That's okay. I was just gonna say that I really, the one thing that I noticed was how each girl, while they were all, kind of fighting towards the same goal, I guess you could say they all had their own different examples that I thought they were setting for an audience, like Abigail, like you said, just singing a song whenever she wants, that was kind of something that a girl could see as you know how to be yourself and not worry about what other people think about you. But then Lucky was a whole nother lesson that you could learn. So I think it was really great having so many strong characters working towards a mutual goal, but also with their own developments and their own examples.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it sort of evolved that one of the sort of background storylines I ended up really loving was the one between Abigail and Prue, where at the beginning when they first set out on the adventure and Abigail starts singing, Prue is like, "Oh my God, when is this going to end?" And she ends up yanking the ukulele away from Abigail partway up the mountain. But then when they get into some serious trouble, it's sort of like the symbolism of Prue realizing if we don't all get through this because of who we are, we'll never make it. So she gives the ukulele back. And that's sort of like the symbolism of Prue fully accepting who Abigail is and loving her for it. And at that very moment is when they make it across the really dangerous ridge because Prue allowed, her just acceptance of differences and all that kind of stuff that we were able to work into the background of the stories going on was juicy. It was really great stuff for me and Ennio to just dig into and represent in a visual way without having to say it in words or dialogue.
I also appreciated, and I'm assuming this is probably done on purpose, the facial expressions of the horses matched the girls that I loved it. I thought it was so cute. I love that little paint horse that Abigail had.
Oh my gosh, Boomerang's my favorite. He's so funny.
So
Um,
I appreciated that so much.
Thank you. So yeah, we knew, the horses are characters themselves, and it was the mission was to not allow the horses to just become props that the girls rode around on. We wanted them to have very distinct personalities themselves. I remember at the beginning we were thinking about all of them. Okay, Spirit, he's like, he's majestic Spirit, and that's who he is. And then we thought about Boomerang, and we approached him sort of like a lovable Labrador retriever who's just stoked to be along on the ride, and all he needs is apples and we're fine. And then we sort of thought about Chico Linda as a very proper cat who has opinions and she's fancy. And we kind of referenced all of these things because of the artists and the designers on the film who don't necessarily know how vast the personalities of horses can be. They're like us. I've never met one horse with the same personality, and we really tried to reflect that in the film.
I didn't think about that. That I would imagine that it is hard to tell somebody who doesn't have horse experience that like each horse is so different. Like my current horse loves to run away from me because he knows he can and he just, likes to be you know what.
Yeah.
But that's just his personality. And the minute I catch him, he's totally fine and he's, happy and go lucky, but he messes with me totally. But then you
Oh
have the
yeah.
other horses who like are desperate for human attention and are in your pocket and won't leave you alone. And
Hmm.
it's so funny though. I guess I never thought of that you would have to explain to people that, these personalities do change per horse and you have to be able to show that because that's you can tell when the different personalities of a horse even just by standing next to them.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's fascinating. It's a fascinating world, and it was really cool to just rely on that, all of the life experience that I've spent hanging around with these guys, and be able to I tried my to infuse as much of all that stuff as I could into that movie. And because we're telling a story for both horse people and for non-horse people, so we had to do a little bit of both. But I really enjoyed like all the little moments I got to sneak in there, like things that happened to me with my horse every single day, like the scene with Lucky getting her face snorted and spat in by Spirit, and it blows her hair back, and then she just laughs her head off. That happens every morning when I get to the stall, and Ziggy's like, "Oh, you don't have any apples? Thanks very much." And it's just all the real life stuff will hopefully, allow everyone to get a little glimpse of what real horse life is like.
I think one of my favorite lines that I remember, I think it was Prue that said it when she said horses can feel what you feel, and that's something that I've heard, right before you go in the show pen saying to relax because if you're nervous, they're nervous. And so hearing that in the movie, it really stuck out to me, and I thought that was a great little add in that is so true. I mean, they really, really do pick up off of what their owner or rider is feeling, and so um, I thought that was a great touch.
Oh, awesome. I mean, that was a big goal for us too with Lucky and Spirit's journey together. Um, we tried to be really visual in the way that we reflected that part of her story. Like Lucky was the one coming in. She was the non-horse person coming into the horse person world. And her first interactions with a horse were with Spirit. So, the first ride, that doesn't go well because she's nervous as heck. She sits on him and, it doesn't go well. They go off into a cannon. She almost falls to her death. But, and then halfway through, you start seeing Prue and Abigail giving her little pieces of advice, like he feels what you feel. If you relax, he'll relax. And it was the physical journey of Lucky and Spirit uh, correlating with the emotional journey that she was going on, learning to embrace and relax and understand what's herself in order to they joined up about three-quarters of the way through the movie. And joining up was a term that I always heard getting thrown around in the horse world, that it became important to me that I put stuff like that in there so that the non-horse audience could follow along just as well. And it was fun.
Yeah, I think there was a really nice, you were able to use those horse terms that all of us equine lovers can understand, but it wasn't so foreign to, non-horse people that they wouldn't be able to follow along, which I think is a very hard thing to do. And I know that there's a couple of other big TV shows out right now that are Western themed stuff. And
Mhm.
I have people who watch these shows and they're like, wait, but I don't understand why they're doing this. And so it's really hard to connect that audience that may not be around horses and understand that a horse slides to a stop or, spins and all these things.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was kind of genius machinations of my producer Karen Foster putting together the team that she did. A big part of why they wanted to bring me into the project was because of my horse experience, and a big part of why we wanted to bring Ennio in as co-director to direct the movie with me was his experience as a father. And he's got a 12-year-old girl who I swear is lucky herself, and he was able to infuse a lot of that authenticity into the story. But it also became a really great balance between that exact thing. Like, I was always the one in the room going, oh, no, a horse would never do that. Come on, guys. And then the other half of the room was like, Elaine, it's a cartoon. I think we can get away with a little more entertainment value here. So it was a nice balance on the crew, creating a story that would serve both mindsets. And I think, without that, it may not have been too successful in that area.
Well, like I've said time and time again, I love this movie. It was so well done. And, I think people with or without kids are all going to appreciate it. I know people from my generation who are, grew up with the original Spirit are going to appreciate the continued story. I know you said it's a little bit of a different story with him being the son or the grandson of the original Spirit, but, it's that same Spirit in heart. Now you got to meet the real Spirit at the Return to Freedom Wild Horse Conservation, correct?
I sure did. Yeah, me and Karen went up to Lompoc, California, to the Return to Freedom Wild Mustang Sanctuary. It's a nonprofit organization that becomes sort of an education center and is expanding out to be home to a lot of rescued Mustangs. And that's where the original horse that inspired the Spirit in the first movie lives. He's when they first began making the first movie, the Stallion and the Cimarron movie, um, Spirit the horse actually lived on the DreamWorks lot for a time so that the artists could interact and get to know and understand horses a little more. And he became the star of the show because he's majestic and powerful, and he's the epitome of wild Mustang. And after the film was done, the studio put in a lot of research and hard work to find him a good place to go. And he's been living out there on the sanctuary ever since. He's 26 years old now, and he still looks like he did back then. He's an incredible animal, and it was really cool to go up there and learn a little more about the place, and see all of these amazing animals in their environment just roaming around the hillsides. And they're doing some pretty awesome work up there.
That's fantastic to hear. I love knowing that, he has a great place to call home and, he's inspired so many people. And I'm sure he got a lot of people involved in the horse industry that may have never crossed that path before.
Absolutely, I'm sure of it. There's so many really cool educational programs where the public's allowed to go and visit them and do all sorts of things on the sanctuary. And I think it's so nice to have uh, an amazing place like that, and but also an ambassador to speak to that side of the horse world, to bring new kids into, and so that they become interested and want to help or learn and just be around other horse people. Even it's not something that's always readily available for a lot of kids. And I can only hope that more programs will start up, and because of that, the popularity of that.
Well, and I hope that your movie inspires some young kids to get involved. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It was so nice to talk to you and learn about your horse life. I'm always excited when I get to meet people that aren't necessarily horse trainers are involved in the industry in that way and kind of branch out and pick the brains of people who are horse lovers but are in different aspects of, careers and life. And so I so appreciated getting to talk with you.
That's so cool. It's not often I get a chance to talk with other horse people about the animation world. It's an interesting conversation. Thank you guys so much for having me. It was really fun today, Nichole and Jillian. It was nice to meet you guys.
Yeah,
it was so fun. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It's so fun that, even though we all have very different horse backgrounds and I guess you could say our mission was kind of all the same, and we all had the same views on how horses bring people together, and that just shows how strong the horse community is.
Horse girl strong.
I love it. Well, for all of our listeners who are listening to this and may have not gone to the theaters already to see this amazing film, Spirit Untamed comes out on June 4th. So by the time this comes out, it will be in theaters. So have an adventure, go to the movie theater, get out of the house, and enjoy the love of a girl and a horse and the adventures that come with it. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh.
I can't wait to eat movie theater popcorn.
Me too.
It's gonna be so good.
I'm so excited. I'm a big movie fan, so I'm so excited for it to come
Amazing. Back. Oh, thanks so much, guys. It was a pleasure.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com.
If you guys have any questions or comments, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys.
And if you like what you're listening to, be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.